Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and these are the 10 most popular cards in Hearthstone. Now, you might be wondering why I'm qualified to tell you what the most popular cards are. Well, that's because I ran a giveaway recently where I asked all of my subscribers what their least favorite and most favorite cards in the game were. I got more than 1,800 responses. I compiled all that data, ran the numbers, and these 10 cards were identified as the ones that people liked the most often. So I now know, at least among my followers, which should be pretty representative of the Hearthstone community at large, that these cards are in fact the ones people love the most. So let's go ahead and jump into this list, taking a look at the 10 most popular cards in the game. Starting off at the number 10 spot, we have Thrall, Deathseer, the Death Knight hero card for Shaman. And I'll just tell you now, this is not going to be the last Death Knight card on the list. Clearly, the Death Knights, Knights of the Frozen Throne, were really popular for people, which makes a lot of sense to me because they take the heroes of lore and of old that we've known in Hearthstone for so long. It's been 3 years for me basically looking at the same old Thrall, same old Malfurion, same old Gul'dan, etc., etc. And it takes those characters and it takes a whole new spin on them. You get these Death Knights that transform them into something new. You get cool, new, powerful hero powers to go alongside them. They're representative or reminding you of something like Jiraxis in the past, which was also one of the most beloved cards in the game. And suddenly now you get 9 cards just like Jiraxis, and that's pretty cool. So they're going to show up on this list numerous times. I think we have, in fact, 3 more on this list, making Thrall, I think, the 4th most popular Death Knight, but also the 10th most popular card in Hearthstone right now. And I get that. Thrall's a really fun one to play. The double evolve effect essentially gives you a lot of fun high roll random opportunities to create ridiculous board states and silly minions and hilarious outcomes, which is really fun to play. Not to mention that Thrall is also just part of a pretty high tier deck in Token Evolve Shaman, and it's fun to play cards that are good in strong decks that have high impacts on the meta. So Thrall, both a good card but also just ridiculously fun to play because of all the crazy RNG elements that can happen with that double evolve. So a fitting card for the number 10 spot. So now moving on to the number 9 spot, we have another one of the Death Knight hero cards, but this time it's Shadow Reaper Anduin for Priest. And yet again, I understand why people love this one so much. I do have to say this card also shows up on the most hated version of this list that'll be coming out soon, because people love Anduin, but they also hate to play against him because he is so darn powerful when you combine him with that free Raza hero power, and you get to do essentially the machine gun 2 damage hero power over and over again. Now clearly that's one of the best decks in the game, the Raza Highlander Priest, and that's why people like to play Anduin. Not to mention it's just really fun and pretty interactive as well, utilizing that hero power, whether you go face, whether you trade minions, making sure you get all of your hero powers off, trying to maximize the amount of damage you can do in a turn. It's a really rewarding and fun style of play in a very powerful deck, one of the most powerful decks we've seen. So I completely understand why people love this card. I also understand why they hate it, but this has been one of my favorite cards in Knights of the Frozen Throne, and probably one of my top 10 favorite cards personally as well. So as we move on to the number 8 spot, this one actually really surprised me. Deathwing is the 8th most popular card in Hearthstone. Now, you never really see Deathwing in Hearthstone. He's very rarely ever played. He'll show up in a deck from time to time that needs a big board clear or some sort of late game last chance threat, but that's so uncommon. I bet I haven't seen Deathwing played against me in constructed format more than 10-20 times in my entire Hearthstone career. It's just very rare to see this card. But I think people recognize Deathwing as just one of the most prominent and powerful characters in Warcraft lore. So that rings powerfully true for a lot of people. It just, they resonate with Deathwing. He's awesome, he's big, he's cool. It's also one of those cards that's just a standout card when you first start playing Hearthstone. It's like, this dude's so big, he's a 10 mana 12/12. His battle cry is insane. He's such a game-swinging kind of card that I think people just have fond memories of this one. Even if they're not playing him necessarily, it's just one of those cards you love to love. It's big, it's awesome, it represents a lot of the fun things in Hearthstone. People like Deathwing quite a bit. So now let's head into the number 7 spot with Leroy Jenkins. This one surprised me a ton. I expected this card to be on the most hated list because I think people hate dying to surprise burst damage from Leroy, particularly these days in combination with Cold Blood in rogue decks. But I didn't expect how many people actually love Leroy. I think people, it turns out, like playing charge minions and like winning games. And of course, Leroy Jenkins is a great moment in World of Warcraft history. You should all watch the video that generated the Leroy Jenkins meme if you haven't. It's very, very old at this point. And I don't particularly like the video myself, but still undeniably a great character, a funny reference, and the entrance mechanic for Leroy and the entrance vocals and everything else is kind of hilarious to watch. And the fact that he summons whelps that just instantly kill him is a funny mechanic as well. But a card that has served a great purpose in Hearthstone as the best burst finisher in the game for a long time, still seeing play today. And as it turns out, I guess the goofiness factor, the fun factor outweighs how much people might hate this card, because he is, in fact, the 7th most popular card in the game. So now moving on to the number 6 spot, this might actually be the antithesis of Leroy Jenkins. It's Reno Jackson, the arch nemesis of Leroy. Leroy's all about finishing games with burst damage. Reno Jackson is all about saving games with big time burst heals. And I'm a little surprised to see Reno on this list just because he's now a wild format card. I thought most of my viewers were standard format focused, but it turns out there's still enough people playing wild, or at least have enough fond memories of Reno Jackson that he's still ranking pretty highly on this list. And I understand exactly why. Reno changed the game when he was introduced into Hearthstone, creating the Singleton, the Reno, the Highlander style deck, whatever you want to call it. That was something we hadn't seen, a cool new way to build decks, made it a lot of fun for players like me in particular, especially people who like more control style decks. Reno opened up that entirely new avenue, gave you a way to shut down aggro decks, which felt really fun too, just knowing that you'd won the game on the back of a giant 29 health Reno Jackson heal. That was one of the best feelings in Hearthstone, and it's a feeling that apparently hasn't easily been forgotten because people still love this card, and he's still one of people's favorites, whether you're in Wild or Standard. I guess Reno started a revolution in Hearthstone, started something cool, and he's forever going to stay in our hearts. So now we're moving into the top 5, and the number 5 spot actually belongs to Lyra, the Sun Shard, another Priest card on this list, believe it or not. I guess a lot of people do, in fact, like to play Priest, and I have to agree with him here. Lyra is also one of my favorite cards in Hearthstone. Now, it can be ridiculously overpowered if it creates just a ton of cards and stupid value over multiple turns, but most of the time, Lyra feels like a fairly balanced, high-powered 5-drop that doesn't win games outright, but can give you some last-ditch efforts to recover a game or create some cool resources, and that's exactly the kind of card I like. She fits in control decks. I like playing slower decks myself. And I think it's just fun to just go ham with Lyra, with Radiant Elementals, and just see what happens, right? There's a lot of randomness, a lot of stuff happens really quickly, and that's always a fun experience in Hearthstone, making those decisions rapidly, figuring out how to utilize your resources, accidentally silencing your own Lyra. All of those things can happen, and just create a really fun environment to play a card. Whether you're in a Rizakis Priest or not, Lyra can still be played. She's been played in all the versions of Priest since she came out, which is really no surprise because she's very simply a super fun, very strong card, and that's what people like in Hearthstone, so she takes the number 5 spot. Up next is the number 3 card, and this is another Death Knight, but this time it's Blood Reaver Gul'dan. I think Gul'dan is so popular because for a long time there, Warlock didn't really have a viable deck. Zoo has always been hanging around a little bit, but in the young girl meta in particular, Zoo just lost a lot of favor and wasn't very good. And then when Knights of the Frozen Throne came on the scene, it looked like Blood Reaver Gul'dan was going to be the path to relevance for Warlock. You can build a ton of crazy control-style Warlocks with Blood Reaver Gul'dan as your big finisher card, summoning you lots of big demons and giving you a really powerful hero power on top of that. Now, as it turns out, that wasn't the most dominant deck throughout the course of the Frozen Throne meta, but after some recent nerfs, Zulok has actually taken a tad more prominence than control Warlock decks, but even Zulok decks now put in demons and run Blood Reaver Gul'dan as that sort of last resort and big finisher to win them games and refill their board. People like big, powerful cards that swing games, that summon tons of minions, that give them win conditions and control-style decks. And that's exactly what Blood Reaver Gul'dan does, so it's no surprise to see him so high on this list. And speaking of big cards that win you the game when they're played, at the number 3 spot, we have Snow Flipper Penguin. Of course, I'm kidding. Snow Flipper Penguin is a terrible card when it comes to competitiveness in Hearthstone. But as it turns out, people love cute Hearthstone cards. Now, I'm not sure if people answered Snow Flipper Penguin just for the memes, just for the laughs, just to be funny, who knows? But this is the number 3 most popular card mentioned by folks on my list. Apparently everybody loves the little Snow Flipper, even though he doesn't get played, even though you rarely ever see him in actual games. He might just be the cutest card in Hearthstone's history, and hey, that counts for something. This is the 3rd most popular card in the entire game. But the poor Snow Flipper does not reign supreme. There are 2 other cards on this list that were named more often than Snow Flipper as the most loved cards in Hearthstone. The second of which is Tyrion Fordring at the number 2 spot, the classic legendary of classic legendaries. I feel like Tyrion Fordring is like the most iconic, the most powerful, just the card to think of when you think of Hearthstone in a lot of ways. He just feels like the best legendary in the game, and he has since he was there on day 1. He's still played to this day. It's hard to build a Paladin deck without Tyrion Fordring. This card is just Hearthstone. It's just people love Tyrion because he's so powerful. When you get Tyrion, when you play him in Paladin, it feels like you just can't lose. It feels like it's always the best play in the game. And there's a lot of fun bundled in this card too, right? He's got a big body, he's got Divine Shield, which is awesome, he's got Taunt, so he shuts out aggro decks, and of course you get that Ashbringer as well. So Tyrion can serve as both a defensive card, an aggressive card, a late game bomb. He synergizes with Death Rattle cards like N'Zoth. He just does a little bit of everything. He's as classic and just as pure as you can get in Hearthstone. So even though he's a class card, and even though he's super old at this point from the classic set, people love Tyrion Fordring. You can't get around that fact. The 2nd most popular card in the game. But somehow, Tyrion was defeated. The number 1 spot is actually taken by Deathstalker XR. And that's awesome. The Death Knight from Knights of the Frozen Throne, of course, for Rexxar, the Hunter Death Knight hero card here. The most popular, most beloved card in Hearthstone, and frankly, I think he's my favorite card in Hearthstone right now too. People ask me all the time on streams, what's your favorite card? And I often answer, man, Deathstalker XR sure is a lot of fun. So apparently I'm not alone. Everybody else out there has to agree Deathstalker XR is their favorite card too. There's just something so viscerally fun about creating zombies. Being able to pick different combinations of cards, trying to find the right thing that fits the exact moment in the game. There's a lot of strategic depth to that. It's also just hilarious sometimes to see the kinds of results you can come up with. And frankly, there are so many different kinds of results that make it fun. You pretty much never know what you're going to get, and you never really know how well it's going to fit the board. Sometimes it's absolutely perfect and hilarious and awesome. Other times it's a failure, but it's still fun because it's so ridiculous and so absurd. Now, I don't know that Deathstalker XR is necessarily the strongest card in the game by any means. I think often you're better off going without it in mid-range hunter lists. But I think people play it just because it can win you games, a super late game value control style matchups that so many Hearthstone players love. Deathstalker XR is essentially the epitome of that style of play, and that to me is why Deathstalker XR is my favorite card in Hearthstone, and apparently that logic applies to the community at large. This is the most popular card in the game. And there you have it. Those are the 10 most popular cards in Hearthstone according to the Regis Kilbin community. It's a pretty nifty list. A lot of different things, not necessarily all legendaries, thanks to Snow Flipper Penguin in particular. But Death Knight's clearly ranked very highly on this list, which isn't too surprising given the fact that Frozen Throne is the most recent expansion. But honestly, Death Knights are just so cool and unique that I think they might have stood out on this list anyway. Even if Frozen Throne were an expansion or two old, I'd still expect to see cards like Deathstalker XR on the list just because they're so fantastically enjoyable. But I'm curious, did this list capture your most popular cards? Did you love something that you're surprised didn't make the cut, that wasn't that popular amongst the community at large? If so, share that in the comments below. I'd still love to hear your most popular cards or why you think some of these cards are the most popular. I'd also like to hear your predictions for what you think the most hated cards in Hearthstone will be, and I'll let you know before too long. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, game on.